What's going on, guys? So today I'm going to show you how to encrypt a password before saving it into a database so that the user's actual password isn't in the database. It'll be a much bigger random string instead. I'll also show you how to check the encrypted password to see if it matches their actual password when they try to sign in on future visits. This is a continuation of our Music Talk app. It's an app like Facebook, but people talk about music. Probably the best idea that's ever existed. In previous videos, which you don't need for this one, we set up React and Node for our front end and back end. We connected to MySQL for our database. We set up React Router, and we set up Redux Toolkit. We have the functionality for a user to sign up, but right now we're saving the password as is in the database. So let's fix that. So we want to encrypt the user's password. Well, of course there's an npm package for that. It's called bcrypt, and it's very easy to use. So in the terminal here, I'm in our project, which has the React and Node projects for our front and back end. I'll change directory into our Node and Express project, which we called server. And then I'll run npm install bcrypt. And that installed successfully. And so now in our project, we can go, we have our client React app, and then our server here, the Node and Express app. Go to our index.js, and we can do const bcrypt equals require bcrypt. And then we can do a const of salt rounds, and that'll be a number. In the documentation they use 10, which seems to be not too small but not too extreme either. The salt rounds number represents a number of calculations needed to produce the hashed password. The higher the number, the more calculations needed, and this helps prevent brute force attacks. And so in our sign up route here, before we insert the username and password into the database, we can call bcrypt.hash. And that's a method, and that method takes in the password that we're hashing. So that'll be the password that we're getting from the form. And then we'll send in the salt rounds number. And then we'll get a callback where we will get access to an error if there is one, or the hashed password if there is not an error. And we'll say if there is an error, we'll do a response.status, and we'll send an error status code of 418. You probably heard of 404 not found or 403 forbidden. You may be unfamiliar with 418, so let me show you here. Pull in my browser, do 400 error codes. When you go to these MDN web docs, we'll go to the client errors. And you got your 403 forbidden, 404 not found. If we go to 418, we see I'm a teapot. The server refuses to attempt to brew coffee with a teapot. So this is an actual thing, and once I discovered it, I obviously had to always use it. So we'll set the error status to 418. That's when we get an error, and then we will send an error message along with that. And we'll just say couldn't hash password. Then we'll do an else. And so if there's no error, we can make our database query and enter that hashed password instead of the usual password. So I will grab this, hold Option, hit up, bring that up into the else statement here. And so yes, you want to enter into the users table, the username and password, and the values which we are escaping here to prevent injection attacks. So we'll send in the username, but that instead of the password, we will send in the hash password. And then from that database query, we have another callback function where if it's an error, we will do the response.status 418, love it. And then we'll send couldn't register user, because this is when we're trying to enter it into the database. So if there's an error with that, we'll just say we couldn't register the user. Beautiful. And then if there's no error, we successfully entered it into the database, and we will send back the username to help update our state in our React application in Redux Toolkit. So I'll save that. Pull up the terminal with control backtick. And we'll do npm start. So our beautiful home page. We'll go to sign up. Go with this tech check again. And so I'll just do password 1234. And there's a network error because I did not start the server. So in our server project here, we'll run node index.js. Refresh this. Tech check. Password 1234. Okay, we were successfully brought to the profile page, so that worked. And now we can look in our database and take a look at this password. And hopefully we don't see password 1234. So we're in our music talk database. We go into tables and then users, and we will call all of those. And here we go. See tech check and then this super long string here, which is definitely not password 1234. So that's good. I am noticing that we have multiple tech check usernames, and you typically do not want that. You want that to be unique. So if we go to our users table in the database and we go to settings, so we have this username and there's this unique clause there. We can check that, hit apply, alter table, music talk, users table, add unique index, hit apply. And I'm sure there's an error because right now there are multiple users with the same username. So let me get rid of these other ones. Okay, I think that's good. Let's go back, try this again. Duplicate entry tech check. Okay, so when you delete them in here, you have to hit apply from this view, and that'll run those delete statements. And then you can go over here and hit apply on this unique rule. And this should work. There we go. SQL script was successfully applied to the database. Okay, so we're hashing the password when they sign up. Now we want to do, when the user signs in, we want to test their password that they're typing in, which is obviously not hashed, and compare it with the hashed password in the database and make sure that it's correct, and let them be authenticated to use the app. So in our index.js on our server here, we'll create another route. And so we'll do an app.post, and then that'll be to sign in instead of sign up. We'll get our request and our response. And again, they'll be filling out a form, and we'll grab a username, which we'll save to a constant called username, which we'll access with request.body with the help of our body parser package, and then .username. And then we'll save their password to a const called password, which we'll access with request.body.password. And we'll do a database query. We'll do select all from the users table, where username equals question mark. So we want to, again, escape user entered data to prevent injection attacks. And then we'll send in the username, and we'll get an error or a result. So when they sign in, we'll get the username password, and the first thing we want to do is select a username to make sure they entered a username that is actually in the database. And if it is, then we will check the password. So the first thing we'll do is grab the username if it is in there. And if it's not, we'll get an error. We'll do our response.status 418. We'll just send the error message. And then if there's not an error, unfortunately we can't just say that if there's a result that we're good to go, because there could be a result of an empty array if we don't select the user, which is what would happen if they entered the wrong username. So we would get an empty array, but it's not an error, so we get a response. It's just still not the username. So we'll have to check for that as well. So we'll do an else if here, and then we'll check the result.length, and if that is less than 1, that means we got that empty array, and now we know they entered the wrong username. So we'll send another error status code, and we'll send an error message, username doesn't match, and we should definitely enter another emoji. And then we'll do one last else statement, and this is where we know that they did enter the correct username, and now we can compare their password with the hashed password. So we're going to use that bcrypt again, and there's a compare method where we send in the user's password, and then the result that we get back from selecting the user from the database will also have access to the password of that user. So we have our result, and it's just an array with an object, which is the user, and one of the properties is the password. So we'll do result 0, which is that first entry, which is the user, and then the password property of that user. So we'll send that in to compare. So that'll be the hashed password. So we'll compare the password that they entered and the hashed password. And then we get a callback function where we get an error if there is one, or we will get a match if they entered the correct password. So we'll say if there's a match, we'll do response.send, and again we'll send the username in an object to update our state in Redux Toolkit. And we'll say if there is not a match, we'll do our 418 error code, and we will send one last error message here, and this is where we know that the password didn't match. So we'll just let them know password doesn't match and enter the emoji. So this is looking good on our server. I'm going to save that. Now we'll have to update our React app. Go to source here. So we have, let's see, our store. And this is our auth slice. And then this is where we're doing the sign up function. We call out to our server, and then this is where we're updating the state accordingly on if the promise is fulfilled, pending, or rejected. And so we will do a very similar thing, but with signing in. So I'm going to do Option Shift down to duplicate that. Select the sign up, and I'll do Command D a couple times to select these different sign up instances, and I will change that to sign in. We'll still want to send in the username and password when they sign in. The error message will be a little different because we are sending a response and then a custom message. So instead of the error.message, we'll do error, and then there will be the response and then .data. So it'll still come through the error, but we're sending the response and then the custom message. So whether it's a wrong username or wrong password, we can display it to the user. And then down here, we have our different cases for the sign up. Again, I'm going to do Option Shift down to duplicate those. Command D a couple times to select these signups and change those to sign in. And then this action.payload will still be the same, which will be the error message that we're sending. So then in our pages, we have our sign up page, and now we want to update our sign in page. Axios, we can get rid of that because we're using that in Redux Toolkit, but we will want to import our sign in action from our store folder and then our auth slice. And then we also want to import the use dispatch hook so that we can call our action, and use selector to access our global state from Redux Toolkit. But use dispatch and use selector we are grabbing from React to Redux. And then lastly, we will import navigate from React router DOM, and that'll be to redirect the user to their profile page after they sign in successfully. So we have this local state of username and password for when they're filling out the form, which we want to keep that. But then we'll also add the user, which we're getting from the global state, which we'll access with use selector. And we'll have the state and access state.auth.user. And we'll also have that error state, which we'll use selector to access that as well. And our auth slice and the error property. And lastly, dispatch, which will be equal to use dispatch, which will let us dispatch our action. And speaking of, we can get rid of this API call in our submit handler when they submit the form, and we will just dispatch our sign in action, and we have to send one argument, which we will do a object with username and password as the key value pairs. So username equals username and password equals password, because you'll see that's how we are accessing it here, username and password. Let's save this file while I'm in here, by the way. And then we can clean this up a bit. We don't need the data or to console.log that data, but we will clear the form once it's successful. And then the error handling we are doing in our auth slice. And now I'm going to go to sign up, our sign up page here, and at the bottom of the form, this is where we're listening for and detecting an error or a user if there is one. And we're going to do the same thing in our sign in page. And so if there is an error, we're going to display the error and let them know. And if there is a user, once they log in, we'll update the state where the user is the username. And if there is a user, we will redirect to the profile page. And then you may remember from a previous video, if you've been following along or if you've seen it, in the profile page, we're listening for a user, and then we greet the user there. Again, using useSelector for the global state to access that user. So we'll save this. Compiled successfully. That's a good start. Go back to the home page, give this a refresh, go to sign in, and now do a wrong password, or wrong username, sorry. Hit submit. Cannot post to sign in. Look at this error message. So we'll have to touch that up a bit. But since we saved our server file, which let me make sure I did, yes, we have to restart our server. So Control C to shut it down, hit up to go back to that command. Give this a refresh. So again, we'll do a username that doesn't exist. And we see it, username doesn't match with the emoji. And now we will do the username that does exist, but we'll do a wrong password. And we see password doesn't match. Lastly, we will do tech check with password 1234 and not that crazy string that we saved into the database. Hit submit, and we are redirected to the profile page and greeted with our username. Okay, so that's how you hash a password before saving it to a database, and how you can compare the username and password before logging them in. In future videos, we'll let users create posts, like posts, let users follow other users so they can see their posts, all kinds of stuff. So stay tuned. And if you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe, drop a comment and say what's up, and thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Check it.